people, and unfortunately not much is happening, so we have to do what we can. I guess that's sort of, I can be kind of depressing if I start talking about it, so I'll stop at that point.
Okay, thanks.
Just my neighbor.
We're neighbors.
Yeah. I'm Laura. I started when it all started.
Yeah, when it started.
Yep. I had a major in environmental studies, and it was sort of a happy little accident. It's been great so far to get involved. So.
I'm Carla. I'm the Parks and Environment Coordinator here at the municipality. My background's in resource management and environmental science.
You do great work.
Yes. Thanks.
And I'm Denise Sharp, and I'm an elder. I have a brand, a health management product that I teach, and it has different levels to it. But one of them is a very strong commitment to stewardship of the environment. So I'm also looking at the grafting gardens, the community gardens, and things like that.
And I'm Will Husby. I'm environmental education consultant with a background in many kinds of biology. So this has been a great thing to be on this committee, and so I'm looking forward to working with all of us. And Jeff, how about your background?
Yeah, well, my day job and my work is in environmental consulting, and I'm a biologist. That's my technical background, and work as an independent consultant, but associated with a large company. I'm really interested in environmental issues, but a lot of stuff that we've been talking about here that I see on the agenda in the past meeting minutes are issues that I don't do professionally. So I'm really excited about getting into some of the stuff that's partly closer to home, and some new issues, and hoping to contribute to life on Bowen. So thanks for having me.
Oh, great.
Thanks for
Great
joining.
to have you on.
Yeah, it's great.
All right. So I guess the first item of business is approval of the agenda.
I'd like to make a small addition, if I could. Just an information update, so I guess it could go 7.4, just an update from Metro Vancouver.
Would you like to make that a regular item?
As a what, sorry?
Regular item?
Could be.
I think that's a great idea.
Sure. Okay, good.
And then I have a bunch.
Yep.
So 4.1 is the handout from Mr. Pollard. It's a supporting document for 4.1. And we have 6.2B, the CARIP for 2018. Supporting document for 6.2. Councillor, these two letters, does one go with 6.3, or are they both going to go under
They're
action
both.
items?
There were action items.
Okay, so I've got 5.1 A and B, the two letters that I gave you. And that's all.
All right. So can we have a motion to approve the agenda? Second here? In favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes. Any changes?
I wasn't here, so I can't really
Yep.
offer any
Yeah.
comments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Motion for approval? Carla? I'll second it.
Okay.
In favor? Opposed? Carried. Doesn't look like there's any public comments. So shall we move to delegations? Dave?
Thank you.
Yes, please join us.
So this is the document that Dave was providing us with.
Thank you. I don't know if you are aware of Bowen in transition, so I thought I would spend just a couple of minutes telling you what Bowen in transition out. We were established in 2010. We are one of about 1,000 community members of the Global Transition Network. Transition Network is basically dedicated to finding ways of coping with radical change, and most notably climate change, but also economic disasters or things like earthquakes, and improving our preparation for that, in the assumption that not all of the answers to dealing with these kinds of crises are going to come top down. And we need to work from the bottom up to help each community become more resilient in the face of these challenges. So that's what we have been doing since 2010. We probably have about 10 to 12 events each year in addition to our regular meetings. So for example, we are the sponsors of the Fix It Fair that was recently held. On all of these things, you'll note there's kind of a common thread. How can we help each other as a community to become more resilient? We have coming up next week, the next in our future Forward Film Festival series, a film about a guy by the name of Ken Ward, who's was one of the valve turners who turned the tar sands pipelines off. And I've had the fortune of meeting with him, and he's going to actually dial in and participate in a post-film Q&A. That's a week tonight, yeah, the 8th. We also run a sustainability tour each year. We occasionally do tours around the community to help our community meet with people who are living off the grid or who are doing interesting things with solar energy and so on. We also run for the last 4 years, we've been running the winter mini energy audits using the library's thermal imaging camera. And so that's just kind of a flavor for some of the things that we've been doing. And the latest thing that we did is we did a video of 2 experts in home energy efficiency and put it up on YouTube. And it was amazing how well it went, how simple it was, and how much valuable information we were able to capture. So the handout that you've got shows the links for those. If you're interested, you're welcome to take a look at them. They're each about 30 to 35 minutes long, and they talk about all aspects of energy efficiency in your home, including health issues, safety, comfort, and so on. And when we finished them, we said, you know, maybe there's something to this. Maybe what we should be looking for are other subjects that have enduring value, where they're not going to, the information is going to change in 6 months. So maybe we should capture these on video and do a whole series of these things and make it a community resource that people can use. So our proposal is that we partner with you, to do a series of these videos that would vary from 20 to 45 minutes in length. Our time for research and interview work would be donated. The only thing that we would ask for from you, and I guess from the municipality, since I understand you don't have your own budget, would be covering of our production costs, which have run between 6 and 10 hours of taping and editing time at $35 an hour, plus equipment rental when it's applicable. So what we would do is, first of all, we would rebrand the 2 videos that we've already done. So they would be rebranded as joint productions of this committee and Bowen and Transition. So we put some stuff up front to edit those. And then we would work with some representative of your committee to identify what are the next topics that we want to do. We would go away, do the research, suggest what the budget would be, who we would interview to do the video, and what research we would do in order to produce produce it. And then once the videos were made, they'd be housed on YouTube, and we would be able to promote them as both a community resource that the Muni could link to on its YouTube site, and Bowen in Transition can likewise promote. So the obvious question is, what are the subjects that we would like to do next? And I've just suggested some that came from a kind of a brainstorming session that we had recently, and they're on the second page of this. And I would welcome from this group, in addition to your thoughts on this proposal, is what are the topics that we're missing? What are the things that might be worthwhile doing? So just running through some of the possibilities: composting, canning, and that could include producing things like kefir and other fermented kind of products. The idea to be increasing our food sufficiency by making stuff available year-round instead of just during our growing season. Growing fruit on Bowen, and we've got a little bit of expertise already from what we've done over the last 10 years on all of these things. Where and how to buy food on Bowen instead of having to go off island. A tour of the Bowen home using solar energy. Everything you'd ever wanted to know about recycling. I know that on the Bowen Island, everything else site, there's always a lot of questions about what do I do with this? Can I recycle that? And so on. How to convert your home lighting to LEDs. Issues in air quality, measuring your carbon footprint, mending your own clothes, water catchment, conservation development, and electric vehicle transportation issues. So those are the ones we came up with our brainstorming. I'd welcome any thoughts you have on the proposal and any other subject.
Thanks, Steve. I think maybe we can go around the circle with questions and comments and things. My first, I'm going to jump in, and I've got to ask Dave and Maureen, councillors, what the policy of the Muni is for this kind of partnership. Do you know what the parameters that this group can work with Bowen in Transition? And so I think we've got to have that right out on the table at the beginning. So,
You want to go,
Can I
Maureen?
speak to it? Sure. I don't think there actually is a formal policy that relates to this kind of request. We do have an existing policy that deals with collaborative projects, but that generally is to do with, it is to do with situations where a community group is interested in using municipal infrastructure, so it doesn't fall under that category. We do have a certain amount of discretion as a committee to make recommendations to council and say, we think this is a good idea, we think it is consistent with the mandate of a committee, we realize there would be certain costs involved, we estimate them to be such and such, what do you think? And on a case-by-case basis, get approval from council for things that are consistent with the mandate and with our strategic plan. And I think that given what you've done so far, given the possible subjects, that we could make a very good argument that what's being proposed here is consistent with overall objectives.
Well, I agree. I love the topics.
Yeah.
Part of our overall objective is to engage the community and help the community be aware of some things that they can do. The only tricky part, and I agree with Maureen, we could make a recommendation, and I think it would be a good one, to move forward. The tricky part is a branding issue. I mean, the municipality has its own brand, so to speak. Its relationship with the public, and so any joint venture where it is having something quite visual like that, it would need to be part of it, approve it, or it just becomes a bit more difficult, just because it's an organization that has to make sure it's representing everyone in the community and all the things that that it does. So that would be the tricky part. It would involve staff time. The budget, it's obviously not a huge budget, but nevertheless, we don't have a lot of money. So that would be an issue too. But there'd be a way of working those things, but I think it would be a useful recommendation for us to make. So.
I think along that lines too, there might be some outside granting agencies for some of these projects that the Bowen and Transition could be the lead applicant, and that with the municipality, letters of support and things like that often are very valuable in securing those funds. So I think there's lots of opportunities, even if the municipality doesn't have enough money for some of these projects. Maybe there's some work.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Just the simplest way to go about this would be that we have on our agenda, we have our CARIP report, and there's always a couple of $1,000s that comes back from the province for CARIP, and in the past, Bowen and Transition has received money to get to purchase the imaging cameras that are housed at the municipality. So if it's a couple of $1,000s where there is discretion as to how that money can be spent, given the scale of the ask here, it's modest, and we might consider, as a committee, when we're a little further along with the CARIP report, and that'll be within the next month or so, to make a recommendation to council to take a chunk of that money to support the work that's being done here.
So there's some ways that the financing can happen. So that's great to know. The other thing that comes to my mind is partnerships usually need some kind of formal written partnership agreements, and I think that definitely would be between the Muni and Bowen and Transition rather than this committee, again, because this committee is an advisory group, but it would be us that would be making those suggestions that get done.
When I look at it, I look at the topics, and I think it's lovely because there's a lot of fun things in here. I would consider how we would open up the topics to a greater audience. In other words, maybe giving the people a little bit more on how do we build a list of topics that could actually top these in a certain way. Some of this is just plain fun, but I can think of things that are actually plain crucial that we might want to talk about, and how do we access that kind of interest in knowing about that.
So
How
you're
do we do
thinking
that?
prioritization too
Yeah.
is part of this.
Yeah.
And I think that would be discussions between our committee and Bowen and Transition. Good points.
Nothing further, actually.
Anybody else got comments?
Yeah, you had asked about potential other topics, and one of the things that Bowen and Transition has done a really good job of is exploring the whole area of permaculture, and that's not identified here, and I don't think that that's something that's all that familiar to Bowen generally. And the conservation development topic is, I think, a really important topic that in the last 6 months hasn't gotten the momentum that it perhaps might have needed, and it's identified as a strategic priority for the municipality. So in terms of prioritizing, I'd like to see something around that area move to kind of the top of the list, and it might be something that the responsible committee on that one is the advisory planning committee. So there's some work with municipal committees here, other municipal committees that would be important. So what are you calling this? Are you calling this something? Is it a...
I haven't got a name for it because, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this is a partnership.
Yeah.
And, you know, you tell us what you would like it to be called. Something that's consistent with your mandate and mission and will be recognizable to your members. I'd be delighted if you want to appoint one or two of your members, kind of be the liaison to kind of do this prioritization. What are the additional subjects and what do you think are the ones that are in order? I mean, I think we could probably do just about any of them. You know, on permaculture, we are sponsoring an event in July, at the end of July, where we're having a permaculture expert come over and spend an entire day doing a workshop with us on Bowen. On conservation development, last year we did a booth on conservation development at the BowFest event. So these are all subjects that we can kind of, we know what the questions are to ask. It's just a question of organizing who we want to interview and so on. And as part of the rebranding, I think it would be great to have members of your committee as co-interviewers, so that this clearly is something that you are partnering with us on, rather than something that is kind of off what's the term? You know, subcontracted to us. And we're prepared to do the work, because this is joyful and important work for us in terms of keep organizing, coming up with all the questions to ask, doing the logistics, getting the equipment and all that stuff, and doing the research.
So what's the next move for us as a committee? Do we make a recommendation to council that we'd like to partner with, be a liaison with the partnership between the municipality and Bowen in transition? Maureen?
Just a suggestion. I wonder if maybe we should take the months between now and our next meeting to sort of hash some things through and come back with something in writing and a formal recommendation that can go to council. And Dave and a couple of members of the committee do that hashing out and firm it up.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. Need to take something to council that's, that feels like it's on its way. And it would include a video clip of some sort of some samples or something like that, so the council could get a sense of, okay, yeah, this is, I like this works for me, or something like that. So they know what on earth it's all about and what it might look like and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so do we need a motion?
Well, I think there's an action item. Do we have some names?
Yeah.
I'd be interested in this.
So, Councillor Nicholson?
I can support that too. And I have a fair amount of experience in video and stuff, so I have a little bit of support on for that.
Denise is also really familiar with Bowen and Transition, because she was one of our core members for many years and was one of the people responsible for the success of the Pixit there.
Okay.
Councillor Hocking, are you on this list?
I'm interested, but I'm a little worried that I'm a bit overcommitted.
So we have two then?
I can,
And Laura?
Laura?
Yep,
That'd be great.
I don't have a lot to bring experience, but
You can be an audience.
Yes, and we could start a tradition here too of volunteering the absent member.
Start. So the action?
Yeah, I that was a more humor than committing Ellen to anything, so.
The action will then be to bring recommendations back to the committee regarding prioritizing topics and outlining strategies for collaboration.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Good.
And David, is that satisfactory? Is that
Sounds great.
Yeah.
We're willing to go whatever level and angle of participation works for you is fine with us.
I'm especially happy, excited by the idea of making some how-to videos available on the BIM website. That's the way a lot of us learn these days is, rather than reading, we go to YouTube and learn. It's the natural way, you know. We're story animals, and we're verbal animals, and we're visual animals. So it's a great tool.
My only comment, just thinking about it, is the 20 to 45 minutes. 45 seems long, since most people watch videos of 2 or 3 minutes, and even that sometimes is too long. But I think 20 minutes, like a how-to, as Will was talking about, like how-to compost, 15 minutes could be done. Like why you should do it, how to do it.
And we can always break them into 2 parts.
Sure.
Yeah.
If there's too much for one sitting.
Yeah.
And I do like those series too, you know, like composting 1, 2, and 3 and that kind of thing.
And the neat thing about these is that they would be Bowenized, as the first 2 are. So they're very specific to the situation that we face on Bowen.
And
every place is different.
Yeah. And what better place to be a host as the Moody? So, you know, as one of the hosts, you know, you're doing a great job already. So, yeah. So, any more comments? Thank you for your delegation, and I hope we continue to have a fruitful relationship and develop some really useful educational things that are of importance to go around.
Looking forward to it. I'm leaving cards that summarize what Bowen in Transition is about, in case they're of interest, and also a copy of our poster for next week's film, The Reluctant Radical, and I hope I'll see some of you there.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
All right, we're into 5 action items. The review of the action items. Are they
It's on
on
page.
Here we are, page 7 of 16.
page 7? Oh, look, Ellen. Oh, yes. Ellen and I have had a brief meeting where we said we will have a meeting later in May to actually get cracking on this.
Okay.
The Metro Vancouver water restrictions went into play
Right,
today.
today,
Yes.
And a couple of years ago, in the absence of any conservation rules on the island, we effectively adopted those restrictions for Bowen. I mean, they're not an easy fit, because, you know, things like use your sprinkler if you're odd numbered versus if you're even numbered on an uncertain date. I mean, it doesn't work over here.
Yeah.
But my expectation is that some stuff should be coming up from the municipality shortly, just reinforcing that. David and I are meeting with part of a sort of ad hoc communications meeting tomorrow morning. And we could bring up just some of the awareness stuff related to water conservation.
Yeah, and we've already had a dry winter and dry spring,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'll just say that's ongoing.
Yes, thank you. Carla.
Yeah, I did that.
Done.
Excellent. That was quick.
So for the camera, that's number 2, inform building inspector that ECAAC willingness to support the step code implementation.
He's very interested in having our help, so.
Great.
Did include a link to BIMTAC minutes as a standing item for Councillor Hocking to speak to. Done. Mark is not here.
Yes.
Ongoing.
Okay, so number 5.
Yeah.
So what this was, it was actually 2 letters. One was to the BC government, saying, giving a rationale for why we should have legislation regarding the liability for fixing up climate-related damage. And the other was a letter to the top, I forget, 20 oil companies, saying, hey, we're from Bowen Island, how about paying for some of the damage? So I wrote these 2 letters. They are, who said I wrote these 2 letters? Well, I did write them, but there was a fair amount of cutting and pasting and plagiarizing going on. So let's look at the liability for climate. That's a 2-pager.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to look at it now or take it home and then send comments. I mean, there's no urgency really. But this is very similar to the letter that was sent around by West Coast Environmental Law, although I edited it somewhat, and some of the details that were in footnotes I actually slapped into the copy because they were kind of important, I felt. So
I like your suggestion that because there's no rush on this, that we do digest this and discuss it in more depth at the next meeting. And I like the way you've given us a little précis at the beginning here, that the history and a general account of its content. I think that's quite useful.
And the second letter then, the one that's a 1-pager, a shorter letter, so this is basically to the oil companies. And I threw some actual information. I mean, we actually had at a council meeting, I think it was a council meeting, the mayor saying, when we were looking at some of the damage that we had this year from severe rain and from that big windstorm, that we're going to have to put some money in our budget on an ongoing basis to deal with things like this. So I kind of referred to that a little bit. And of course, Chevron or any other oil company is not going to send us a note back saying, oh, how much should you pay? I mean, it's all about awareness.
Yeah.
It's all about awareness and hoping that this helps build awareness, that's all.
Yeah. Maureen, you were
Just a suggestion. I mean, the letter to John Horgan and the others.
Yeah.
Where you get traction with these folks is when you can get a resolution at UBCM, the Union of BC Municipalities. And I'm just looking at their deadlines for submitting resolutions. Bowen, in the last 4 years, has not submitted, at least 4 years, hasn't submitted any resolutions. It may make sense to try to get this to UBCM as a resolution on the agenda, just in terms of profile.
When's the day?
The deadline's June the 30th.
Okay.
We've got time to chew this over, make it stronger, get it to council, get it to UBCM.
We could also investigate to see if anyone else is planning to do that. I mean, West Coast Environmental Law might have already.
Yeah, but they can't submit. It has to
No,
go
but
from
they
the
would-
municipality.
Yeah, but they went, West Van sent a letter, I believe, and some others, so it'd be interesting to see. We might be able to find out what else is happening, but yeah, good idea.
Can I put a deadline of May 22nd for comments, David, on the letter, and then a week later put the agenda out?
That's a
And then we
great
could
idea.
do a recommendation at the next meeting, and that
That's a
could
good
be council 2 weeks later.
That's a great idea.
And could you, tell me if this is asking too much, if you could send several days ahead of that, an email to the committee members reminding us, just to make sure that it doesn't slip off anybody's radar.
Good.
The other thing I'd suggest to expand this is approach at least one of our Bowen Islands Trust trustees to see if the Islands Trust as a unit would make such a resolution, because I have heard through the grapevine that several of the islands in the Islands Trust in the last big windstorm, they're talking about 30 to 50% of the trees on the island being knocked down or damaged. So stunning impact. So I think the other islands like us are good allies on this option. So we can put that as an action item for you to contact an islands trustee.
Are you
It's just,
David?
yeah, it's just occurring to me, for Maureen's idea, I edited the letter that, where did I get it from? West Coast Environmental Law. I don't know that that's a letter that was signed by 20 organizations. If we're going to do it at UBCM, it would be useful to know what kind of letter, like if everybody else has used the exact same letter that was sent by West Coast Environmental Law, then that's what we should have, probably, rather than my slightly edited version. So it'll be useful to find out. I'll contact West Coast Environmental Law, put that as an action item, and I'll see if get an update.
I do recall that they said it would be good to edit it
Oh, did they?
on their website, yeah,
Okay.
when we were looking at it originally.
Okay.
Is that anything that you can add to it to personalize it is beneficial.
Okay.
And when we send forward a resolution to UBCM, they do look at all of them and sort of figure out which ones go forward and which ones are just saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So sending something forward doesn't necessarily mean that it would
Okay.
get
All right,
on
so
the
not to worry.
list of resolutions.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks.
Any more discussion?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David, for doing these and
I promised it 2 months ago, and so
well,
I did it on the last day.
this is
Still
I
counts.
know how busy you are too. So I still think we all appreciate that. So next action item from April 3rd.
Oh.
Yes?
Yep.
All consider ideas to include in the CARIP. How do you say that?
Karen.
CARIP?
So we're going over that.
Yeah. as an item.
Agenda item.
Yeah.
So
Done. Includes report on this agenda, done.
No, you've got that.
That's an agenda item.
Yes, okay.
So done.
All right, so just blasting over here. Business arising from the minutes. So we've got
Councillor Nicholson.
Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, this is following up on the presentation that Julie made to this committee. Wasn't here to hear it, but I've met with her a couple of times, and she requested that the food sovereignty group that she's working with have the opportunity to speak in a climate conversation. And this is kind of unusual in that the climate conversations have kind of just evolved. You know, good idea, we find a day, we announce it, we do it. And they generally bring 15 to 25 people coming to talk about topics. And we've done things like getting feedback on CARIP reports before they go in. There's been a session on soils, there's a session on solar panels, one on heat pumps, just sort of anything that seems to be topical and of potential interest. So Julie asked if she could do it, and given that we now have a committee, up until now we haven't had a committee to actually say, yes, that sounds like a good idea, or no, it doesn't. In the past, it was basically Sue Ellen and I would say, yes, sounds good, we'll do it. So this is coming to you for feedback and an okay. The group had a further meeting, and what they have done is sort of advanced from their initial idea. They want to do something that's sort of a three-part thing in September. And one is they want to present the deliverables toward a resilient food system on Bowen. So that's the outcomes of the work that they will be doing over the next couple of months. And then the second is they have invited Harold Steves, who was involved in the establishment of the Agricultural Land Reserve, to come and talk about the work that he did, and not exactly sure if there are other aspects of what they wanted to speak with him about, and then a repeat of the soil lecture that Phil Gregory did. So it's a bigger package that they're thinking of. I would imagine this is probably something like 3 or 4 hours rather than the hour and a bit that is usually a climate conversation. But there's like 4 months in which to tee this up. So.
Are you saying sort of 1 3-hour session or 3 different sessions? Or?
No, I think they want to do it in one chunk.
Just like a mini workshop.
Yeah, it's not clear from the message. We'd like to organize 3 talks instead of 1 presenting on the deliverables. I mean, it could, if there's interest, I think it could be packaged in a couple of ways. It could be 3 separate talks. I mean, I could see people being quite interested in hearing what Harold has to say. The soil talk, Phil's soil talk, has been delivered in the past, and it is video recorded. It is on our website, but he gave it a couple of years ago, and I imagine that he sort of had to develop his thinking on it since he originally gave it. So, what do you think?
Yeah, and for me, I really like the ideas there, those 3 ideas. I'm a little concerned that if it's all in one chunk, it's easier to be busy that day and miss all 3. And it's harder for lots of us to have a big chunk of time. And I've watched great workshops where they're so long and people are fading and losing, and some fade out of the room. So my thoughts would be for recommending 3 separate ones spread out. But I've always said I have strong views lightly held, and so I can easily be dissuaded if others have other ideas. Any more discussion?
I'm with Will. 3 hours is a half-day workshop.
Yeah.
It's too long.
I mean, the other consideration is what other things we might want to do as climate conversations. What are they? We have a CARIP report that's going forward to council at some point in May. The first time we resumed doing those in the last council, we did bring it to an open session where interested members of the public could come. There might be the appetite for things like electric cars and solar panels and so on has gone in the last while. So thinking we could make a commitment to doing 3 separate sessions, but sort of what the scheduling of those would be, whether we want to intersperse them with other sessions for some of these other issues.
So have like a little speaker series of sorts?
Yeah.
That would entertain.
Yeah. Maybe the same way that we do with community economic development. Over a year we had a whole bunch of speakers, and it was to establish a foundation for
A relationship with the
Yeah.
community. Sounds really good.
I like that
I like
idea.
that idea a lot.
David?
I'm just wondering, what was Harold? I know Harold really well. He wouldn't want to come and, he won't have a PowerPoint or anything like that. He'll just talk. So it could be combined. Harold could be combined. Like he'd give, if they were talking about their, towards food system resilience, he'd be a good commentator on it. He'd be able to comment because he's got such experience in all sorts of things.
So maybe pair those two.
It could maybe pair those two.
Or a panel even, maybe even a small panel that would have a discussion that could interact.
Yeah, sure, yeah. But I'm just thinking of how Harold is, and I mean, he's a very informative guy. And he certainly won't have some sort of presentation and snappy thing, he'll just talk. And he can talk on a million topics. He's very passionate about climate change, farming, the ALR,
Yeah.
and all kinds of things. He's got stories galore.
Yeah.
He's having trouble with ducks right now.
With
They're-
ducks.
They're eating all his scraps. They're digging them up.
Well, what if in the short run I got back to Julie and said,
Yeah.
yes, and how about pairing, as you suggested, pairing Harold and their report on the toward food sustainability on Bowen, and yes, for the magic of soil, let's think about when to schedule it, and the rest of us kind of think about what some of the other topics might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's good.
Great.
Okay. And that there will be, I imagine there'll be some expenses associated with bringing Harold over here. So this is something that David and I should be taking to.
Yeah.
We have a firming up strategic planning money and priorities session in the middle of May. So we should be making an ask to get a little bit of money for the climate conversations, I think.
Yeah.
Or to start using some of the CARIP money for that.
Great stuff.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
That's okay, Jeff?
Yes, thank you.
There is a resolution kind of suggest, do you want to just put it as an action item or?
Action.
Okay.
And just any more discussion? Okay. So,
So,
yeah.
the CARIP report is on table. I've completed the 2018 report with the ideas that we presented last time. And I erased everything that was unnecessary so we can go through it a little bit more easily. So we're just going, I think some of us weren't here, but we're just going over the action items that either the community did or that we as a municipality did in 2018, or actions that are proposed for 2019. So also things that we've already done this year, we can put in there as well. The first area here is broad planning actions. We actually, I mean, this is pretty good so far. I mean, it's always kind of positive when you're filling this out, because you're like, oh wow, we did a lot of things,
Yeah.
you know? But if anyone had already thought of anything to add, I can take that down right away. Or if we want to go through each section, we can do that too. Just kind of skim through them and see if there's anything that I missed that you can think of.
My suggestion is option 2, to skim through and see if people might shake the bushes a bit.
Sure, so broad planning actions is the first one.
Just a little side comment about continue to promote transportation alternatives. I've been going into town regularly recently, and I walk on the dock there, and I'm catching a 1050 boat, and looking at the bike shed, and noting that it's overflowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's that little initiative is encouraging people to
Yeah.
use small vehicles, and some of them are electric. So that's it's working.
Yep. Maybe we can add something to 2019 as well, just about using transportation alternatives and exploring further options.
So when, was the bike shed completed in 18 or was it early 19?
I think it was 18, I think.
Yeah, okay. But I don't see it in here, or is it in here and I just missed it?
It's definitely in the transportation actions.
It's a cumbersome form, because it sort of divides things up into sections, and you're always asking yourself, which section does this go in?
Yeah.
So transportation on page 6, corporate transportation, oh, sorry, built and open bike line. So that's corporate transportation action.
Mhm.
Doesn't that mean what BIM did for BIM itself, or no?
No,
So
for-
it means stuff that what does corporate mean in this case?
It means that we did, as opposed to that the community did.
Oh, okay, all right,
So
okay,
the
got it.
we built it, the
We built it,
community
yeah.
used it,
Okay,
so
yeah,
we
yeah,
can kind of
perfect. Yeah.
use the both of
Yeah.
those.
Good, sorry.
So, Q8, the community-wide planning action, the Fire Smart initiative, that's ongoing, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, we got a lot more funding this year for it, so it's
And
just
so, yeah, and
happening.
great, timely thing to be doing.
I wonder if you could add in what we did in 2018 was, and I guess it's 2019 as well, just securing the funding for all of the emergency planning, including the Fire Smart. But we got a lot, you're right, we got a lot of grants,
Yeah.
well over 100,000. If it makes sense, Carla.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can probably make a pretty broad one, secured funding for a whole lot of things, so.
Where did the measuring footprint from outside walls come from? Is that from planning?
Yeah.
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 That's good.
I think feel like everyone's moved on. Anything for building and lighting actions? What was the other video for Bowen and Transition? They did the energy audit one, and then they had two, didn't they?
There's two parts. Those are both dealt with the same topic. And the electric car charging station somewhere in here.
Yeah, that's in transportation as well.
Is the location been decided on the charging station?
Apparently not, which I found a bit puzzling when I heard about that the other day. Because I thought wasn't this a group? I cannot remember what, no, maybe it was BIMTAC. Maybe it was this group. Was it BIMTAC that recommended down at the health center and so on, Caring Circle and library area. And wasn't the other one right here? I forget.
I think it was narrowed down to two, either
Yeah.
the library parking lot
Yeah.
or in front of the Caring Circle.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
One of those, somewhere right there.
I think there was some concern also though that it would take away parking from those places. So, I'm not sure what's happening right
Okay.
now with it, but.
Oh,
I think I had a conversation with Kathy this afternoon, and it's advancing. They're
Okay.
coming to a landing.
all right, okay, good.
And you've got the truck share cooperative.
I've got one to add on the transportation page. Q50 and 51, the community-wide ones. So, so this wasn't a municipal action, it was what the community did. Bowen Transportation Society formed to develop, I've got some words,
Is it 2018 or 2019?
it was 18,
18?
Yeah.
Okay.
it was
What page is that on?
page 6,
Okay.
under transportation options. So it was formed so it's got status as a non-profit. I don't know if we need to say that. Bowen Transportation Society formed to develop a financially sustainable, convenient, fast alternative to automobiles for commuters. And I'll say it again. Bowen Transportation Society formed to develop, and you can change these words, a financially sustainable, unlike Peter's Bus, which has been struggling and struggling.
Not for the notes.
Yeah, not for the notes, sorry. And of course, I mean, this is built from Peter's ideas, or it's going to be built from Peter. So financially sustainable, convenient, fast alternative to automobiles for commuters. And commuters will extend to not just people working, but students doing extracurricular, so I'm going to call them commuters for now, high school students.
To single occupancy vehicles or?
Sure.
just-
I mean, really, I think it's to automobiles. I mean, people can do what they want in their cars. This is they could be car sharing or whatever, but this is cheaper, faster, less stressful.
Do we have continued advocacy for an electric ferry in here?
That she needs to,
I don't, I said continue to advocate for water-based transportation alternatives for commuters.
Yeah, you get electric ferry.
electric ferry, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we've got meetings coming up, but still, it was talked about last year.
Cookies just got there, isn't it?
Sorry?
The cookies just received.
Electric ferry?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's diesel, but it has the option of switching
Oh.
over to electric, so it's electric ready.
Okay.
Yeah, I was reading about that today,
Yeah.
Okay. Wow,
which is great.
yeah.
Speaking of electric ferry, is it within this scope to suggest aligning with other islands and the Islands Trust to lobby for electric ferries as a unit rather than just as an individual island? So
Yeah.
I think that would be a fair comment, but that would be 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so next year.
So what happens when we send this forward to the province? There's this part, and then there's the second part, which has the money. You know, we spend so much money on fuel on Bowen Island, and I think what they do is, well, one, they never give us feedback on what we did and didn't do, so it's not as if they actually cross-check and say, you screwed
No,
up,
we
or
didn't do that
you got a big
education
plus.
piece.
yeah.
What they're concerned about is that there's an awareness within the community to actually report on an ongoing basis on what has been done. So it helps to create, it's supposed to help to create community awareness. And then they often will select, and they tend to need our help in doing this, they'll select something that's like really cool that we did and that we're really proud of. And then that'll sort of go into a mix, and they may or may not choose to profile it. So I think that they profiled the bus in prior years. And it's usually just a little blurb, but it can be quite nice in that it's an acknowledgement. It's there.
I put the link to the video for the bike barn, just because I had just seen it. And
Very
I thought
good.
that was
Yeah.
pretty easy,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
easy one for them to
Yeah.
feature.
yeah, they love that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If they can get some visuals. So the feedback we get on this is a check.
We'll take it.
Yeah. And we get to decide how to spend it too.
Under car sharing, the van pool on Bowen is still going.
Yeah.
You might have seen it, my husband rides in it, but they all bought a van together and
Yeah.
they're all doing it. And they just put the decals on the van, and I think that's pretty
Yeah.
remarkable for
Yeah, it
a
is.
small group of people to,
Yeah,
because they had the Jack Bell rideshare that went bankrupt.
yeah.
And so then they
Oh,
bought
okay. I
the
didn't know
van from Jack Bell, and it had many problems, so they decided to take the money that they had, and Chuck took the loan out, and they all kind of owned shares of it, and then,
That was last year?
yeah, they bought it, yeah, within the last like 6 months, like
So
a
that is-
used
that's really good.
minivan, but definitely, yeah, so that's about like 7 people.
Yeah.
We just lost a person, but,
Well, that's a precedent for the kind of thing that
Oh,
the
yeah.
Transportation Society
Yeah.
is trying to do. That's good.
yeah,
Yeah.
so Chuck Fowler's kinda in charge of it, but.
Yeah, there was a transportation innovation meeting on Monday, and they were there. I
Oh,
think
good, okay.
Chuck was there, I think.
Was he?
He's-
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he has Mondays off usually.
okay, yeah.
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 Oh, yeah.
So that, can you come up with some words for that? That should go in here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know if that would be under car sharing or,
I think that's can be its own action. for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
ensure the continuity of blah, blah, blah
Mhm.
through private action, private citizens or something like that.
yeah.
yeah. I'm not really sure, I'd have to ask how it works totally, how they all own it, but.
That's amazing, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty affordable too. It's $231 a month, and then
Yeah.
it's your ferry fee.
Yeah.
So,
And is it all still UBC?
it goes on, yeah, because
Goes
Chris will
UBC.
drive it all the way, so there's
Yeah.
not way you can see
Okay.
it there. Point Gray, but they'll drop you off downtown.
Downtown, because I know they,
Yeah, but they get the van pool spot in front of the general store, which is nice, like when
Right.
the refit was happening.
yeah, right.
So.
Have you captured in here sort of the food sovereignty stuff somewhere?
I don't think I have. I mean, there was a couple of things maybe. In other climate actions, I have permaculture principles
That would work.
at Collins.
And there are other, I think, yeah.
Collins Farm. Permaculture workshops.
It's probably something that supported the emergence of a food sovereignty group on Bowen Island.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of it at one point, so I'm surprised it's on here. Oh, here, on climate change adaptation actions. Work with Bowen Agriculture Alliance and
Oh, you
Bowen
had it.
Transition to establish a food security group.
They're a separate group. They're not, I mean, that actually happened, sort of, so there is a standalone group now that Julie is part of. Julie and
Is that a 2019? Did they just form?
yeah, I think so, yeah. They sort of percolated and then they popped in 2019.
Carla, I'm on page 7, that the Q6 community-wide water and wastewater action proposals for 2019. Open a water school at Crafton Gardens.
That was, we were talking about it a few times, we're not even close to working on, I don't know what you've done on that, haven't talked, but, that is certainly something that we talked about.
So, that's by the group that you're working with?
Actually, that started in the fall. It came through the little workshop that we did here, trying to get ideas. And I brought it forward because I saw the video and I thought it would be so wonderful to have something like that. And you brought it up as an interest also to help.
Yeah.
with that. And we haven't done anything with that, but it's certainly something, we created a kids space at the gardens, which could be a location that we could happen at the water school.
Yeah.
But we haven't,
Yeah.
haven't talked to you about it.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Okay. Sounds cool.
So what is your plan to take this to council on the, whatever it is, the 13th?
Yeah, I thought this would just be a final review.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
We have a report, a weed app.
Oh, we don't. It's the BC Invasives Council.
I have 4 on my driveway, I need to report.
We could spend all day.
The extractivator.
Wow, lots of work there, Carla.
Thanks, Carla.
And I hope
Yeah.
it actually is.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great to read.
Amazing.
Any more comments? All right.
Thanks for
Pleasure. Okay, I'm just trying to find out where we are.
So 6.3.
What, three?
And emergency response.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first is the excerpt from the council meeting, which is asking, so councillors referred the climate action emergency
Yep.
to this committee.
Yep.
To, I'll let you guys do that.
I was away, so
Oh.
I'll let Maureen.
What did I have to say about that? It was referred to us, we did a little bit of talk at our last meeting and thought about some potential actions that could be put into a bucket that could come back to council. But we didn't make very much headway on it. There is another, there's a kids strike coming up on I think the 5th of this month. I think that's right. No, another event. And I think the idea behind this was the kids went on strike. They came to Municipal Hall. The mayor spoke with them and said, yes, yes, yes. And this is to make it real in terms of a response.
Okay.
Well, there's the models that are out there, I guess, we talked about in the last council, the last meeting that we had, and that there's some from Ontario and hasn't Vancouver now declared a climate emergency?
Yeah, they adopted a plan a couple of days ago. It's characterized as 6 big moves,
Yeah.
and they have been very specific about what they want to accomplish.
And the Islands Trust has their model too. Is that, I think Bowen Island should declare a climate emergency. We've got some models. Is this something that we should form a little subcommittee to do a draft and then and present it to the committee, and then we'll refine it?
That's probably a good
Probably
idea.
a good idea. I could, the stuff I was going to talk about Metro Vancouver, I could just bring that up right now because it's sort of relevant. So at the Climate Action Committee, that was 2 weeks ago or so, we had a presentation by the Sustainabilities, 3 young women, grade 10 girls, gave a great presentation, and they were urging us, Metro Vancouver, to have targets that aligned with the 1.5 degrees rather than the current targets, which are aligned at 2 degrees. This came up at, so I was also at a Metro Vancouver workshop on the weekend, a retreat kind of thing where we were away, and a bunch of things came up, but one of the things that came up was this, the idea of setting more aggressive targets, climate change targets, and the board agreed. So to set 1.5 degree targets rather than 2 degree targets, which means carbon neutral by 2050. It's not 80% reduction, maybe 0. So it's a significant target. And so I was going to recommend that we have the same target. Now, what can we do to advance that target? Our big thing is transportation. And the people who do the transportation are to some degree TransLink and BC Ferries, and we're pushing them, both of those organizations. But
If we think along the lines of sort of the branding model that Vancouver uses, 6 big moves.
yeah,
I mean, if there were to be 5 key actions for Bowen Island,
Okay.
what would they be? They would be get an electric ferry.
yeah.
I mean, it's not within our purview,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we can advocate, we can push for
Okay.
it. Get
Yeah.
a free transit system
Yeah.
on Bowen. We pitched that in late 2016, and then talked with Kevin Desmond, the head of TransLink, and the timing wasn't right. The timing might be right now. Dealing with the composting issues, you know, all that stuff that we ship off island.
So,
So like, there's 3 potential
Yeah.
big moves
Yeah.
that Bowen could make.
Yeah.
so I'm happy to, I think we should have a little group work on this, and I'm happy to be part of that group. And I think that's a great idea, Maureen. You know, 5 big moves, 3 big moves, whatever the heck to come up with.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to do that. I
Do
think that's a
we
great
have
idea.
more volunteers on that group?
And I think it could, I think it could be along with the accepting the 1.5 degree target.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm going to volunteer to work with David on that.
Yeah, keep our forests. There's one.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, we got 4 now.
We got 4.
Almost done. Have the 50 moments.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Metro Vancouver is committed to restoring a lot of forest. I think we don't have to restore as much forest as we have to protect and maintain.
Yeah.
But we've got
Green
some
infrastructure, yeah.
some models here. Jeff, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Anybody else?
Not me.
I might sit in just for the pleasure of learning, because there's some things you're talking about a little bit more than I can chew right now,
Yeah.
but.
Okay.
The one specific thing we did bring up at the last meeting was, and some of the local businesses have already done this, is moving to banning plastic and single-use stuff.
Yeah.
And the general store, they've still got their plastic bags, but they've got lots of paper bags sitting out there now.
Yeah.
So things are sort of inching in that direction. And for kids trying to get their heads around some of the practical stuff, but that would be a really practical thing to put into it.
Yeah.
It's not so much a big move as a visible move.
I've been involved in plastic quite a bit, and that's with the Zero Waste Council and the Zero Waste Conference every year, and plastic in the oceans, and that's a tricky one. Plastic bags is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Because it's not actually much volume, and they're useful. Plastic is really hard. I don't want to get into it. Plastic actually has huge advantages over glass and other things. It's much lighter. It actually reduces GHGs on a lot of things. It preserves food longer, but it always ends up in the environment. And so it's got huge advantages and huge disadvantages. It's a really tricky one to figure out. And there are people working on it.
And I think at least single use
Single use is terrible.
is the one to concentrate on.
Yeah.
It seems that over time, the consciousness around plastic, the use of plastic, is changing, and that's what you're making me aware of. Is that if we do what we were talking about briefly last time I think it was, we were talking about looking at working on plastic, and I was offering my service, my support, and talking with Helen about it, and it's like, how do you approach such a big topic, and yet we want to make a change, but you're making the point that there's pros and cons to everything. So how would we approach a change, and how would we begin to make a statement about consciousness around it? So, but I'm wondering, is it like, I'll be working with Ellen on that, is if we could maybe even consider talking about that, and how could we approach it even in small little bites, enough to make an impact on the consciousness of what we're doing and how we're doing it.
This is Ellen McIntosh?
Yes, that's right.
At the ready table.
So subcommittees, generally you can invite other people if you want to.
Ask them to join them.
Well, that's a good idea.
Because like, she has her ideas, but I like the idea of the plastic bag, idea of working on that. I don't know how to work on it, but I think moving forward a little bit is better than nothing anyway.
Is there a timeline on
this?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have something for our next meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else critical. For our next meeting, then go to council. So somebody needs to set up a doodle poll. Who knows how to do that? Maureen, you do for sure.
Oh, dear.
I'm not part of
She's
it.
not on that subcommittee.
I'm doing something else.
Yes,
Okay.
she's husbanding her, or wifing her energy, yes. I could do that if if it's in the minutes there. And I think I'm going to include Alan Whitehead, absentee as
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, that makes sense.
So we could do that in one meeting, I think, a couple hours.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's a super idea. Thanks, Maureen.
Hey, can I ask, did we actually notify the schools?
I don't know.
It's got that sort of, they notify the schools that
Yeah,
we're doing
we sent-
something.
So, no.
We had a big drama about
We
it.
discussed this
It was a
because
strange
we weren't
resolution.
sure. I think that we thought that it would go to us first and that we were going to recommend actions and then we
And,
would notify the school of the actions, not just that
We're doing this.
we're doing something.
And also, who's notifying the school as well? There was
Yeah,
that.
it wasn't
It's a
clear.
funny resolution,
Yeah.
yeah. Would that be Will or
It's-
Carla?
I'm thinking it should come from something more permanent than this committee.
Also says the committee.
Okay, put it down that I will when we've got the actions declared and approved by council.
Maybe after next meeting then?
After next meeting, when we've got something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks
Okay.
for the stimulation. Here's what we come up with.
Yeah,
Maybe invite them to the council.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
And, I think not just Bix, we could invite all the different schools on board.
Yeah.
Okay. It's update time.
Okay,
Staff update from Carla.
I have two things to update on. We got the composting grant.
Yay.
We did, yay!
Oh,
done.
It's conditional approval right now,
What,
but he
what,
said there's no, it's approved.
what is the grant for?
So we can start kind of planning for that if we want to. It's for $10,000 for a feasibility study for on-island composting,
Excellent.
but I think we can kind of,
Well,
make the terms of reference a little bit more broad, so
I'm
if we
going to
don't.
speak to composting in 7.3, so.
Oh, you are?
Yep.
Just the grant, when we applied for it, it was a matching grant. So the province was going to kick in 10 if the municipality was going to kick in 10. So if we've got the province confirmation that they're going to continue to allow us to have that money, we need to get confirmation that the municipality is going to chip in 10K.
Okay.
So there's 20,000
Okay, that's great.
To
I
play
didn't
with.
know that.
Yeah, history.
Yeah. In doing the CARIP report as well, they had a link to a bunch of funding, and in particular for energy generation, there's a lot of money available for feasibility studies and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if we play it so that we're looking at biodigesters and
Yeah.
that kind of thing as well, then we can get more. And I mean, they will fund like 80% of those kind of projects. So
This is a
it's
province?
there's a couple different options. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities,
Oh.
ECM, there's quite a few.
Okay, I mean, I
There's
know the
quite a
province
few
had
sources.
ones at the beginning of the year, and that you have to be able to generate energy, and it was tricky. Yeah.
We
Well,
did So Ellen and I did a lot of research on this some years ago, and we looked at the Green Municipal Fund, and they are very generous. The challenges for Bowen have had to do with, we have a very high diversion rate to begin with. So in terms of where we are to where we can go, there's not actually that much room, and that was a concern for them. They might get more bang for their buck if they go to a community that is really crappy when it comes to handling its waste, and they can bring it up further. The other issue has to do with if there actually were a facility, where it would be located. And the locations that were looked at were up Hikers Trail Road, which was not a good option, Athletic Park, which was maybe an option, but not great.
Athletic Park, you mean the
Logger Sport
Logger,
Field adjacent to that. And then the third was adjacent to the current recycling depot, which was the one that ended up made the most sense, and kind of where we left it.
And you're going to talk about
Yeah, do you want me to do it
Cabinet
now,
Council,
since we're talking
or-
about?
I think we've got the Transportation Advisory Committee before that.
Yeah,
That's you too, David.
Well,
yeah.
What,
So you're-
I was just going to say that, so council has looked at, we asked them for terms of reference for that feasibility study, and that went to council, and you're going to be talking about it May 13th at the strategic planning,
Yes.
so we should get something back by next meeting.
No.
No?
Here's why.
Okay.
So I'll talk about composting, then I'll do transportation. So,
Okay.
Is that diversity update?
No,
oh, keep
no,
going.
there's more. I just wanted to, that's
Keep
all I
going.
know about it, so
Keep
why
going.
don't you
Yeah.
direct me
Agenda,
later?
Carla.
Sorry.
Number
Keep
2 on
going,
your
keep going
update.
on your stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to update on was, I don't know if you remember last meeting or the meeting before, we did this, we went over the action items in the SEEP, and I just noticed one that I didn't know what it was, so I looked it up, and it's a host a climate smart program delivery. So I sent them an email to ask them about it, and had a little kind of phone conversation with them, where they showed me a little bit about what they do. Steph, do you mind bringing up?
The
on there?
seat?
What's that?
The seat?
No,
Beef.
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 Beef dot, no, just on the internet. Beef.eco.
Oh, okay, not this.
No. No, everyone has that.
Beef.
Beef.eco.
Eco.
So,
Watch the video?
no, there's no, I'll show it to you after. Hold on. Or we can click on one.
Click on video.
Keep going down. Look at it.
Do you want to drive?
Sorry. Just click on one of the dots on the map. But yeah, I can do it too if you want, sure. Thanks. So, okay. So what these people do is they will prepare this beep for us. It's a business energy and emissions profile. So it will do a snapshot of all of the businesses on the island, small and medium-sized businesses, and they'll look at where opportunities exist to reduce emissions. This is it's pretty neat what they do. So it gives you an overview, and then this is for one town, I believe. No, it's just the whole British Columbia?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we should go back. They said they can, oh, sorry.
a non-profit organization or a private business or?
It's a non-profit, but, okay, let's see, City of Surrey, so here's their BEEP. So this costs $25,000 to make. This is for Surrey, so I don't know how to get back. They have these really cool maps and dashboard. Sorry, I don't remember. She showed this to me once, and I have already forgotten how this works.
So what?
So, anyways, sorry. So they do like these really cool kind of heat maps on where the most emissions are, what kind of businesses are producing the most emissions, and an overview of where the opportunities are. And then what they also, for another $5,000, will create a business engagement plan. And this is for the municipality to do. So we do these two parts. Well, they do all the work, but we pay them to do this. And the business engagement plan is to try and figure out how we can get all these companies to sign on. And it costs them about $1,500 for small businesses. But what they get out of it is they get 3 workshops. They're half-day workshops, and they would do those over, say, 3 years, once a year, something like that. And then they would also get personalized time, so there would be an advisor who tells you how you can reduce your footprint, what opportunities you personally have. They give you some access to software to calculate your carbon footprint and review all of your data after the first year to see how much you've reduced your emissions. It sounds interesting.
Is this
I guess
something-
I just wanted to gauge interest,
Yeah.
because I think for us, we would have, if this was something we were interested in, it would probably be a pretty slow process. We would have to make a recommendation to council would, talk about it, and but I guess I'm just trying to bring it up and see if anyone has any interest in it.
Is this something that each company would opt into? So it would be something, like I could see the Ready Potato would probably jump on something like that. Because that's where their mindset is.
Yeah.
And others maybe less so. But I think it would be really nice to promote that as something that a business could say. I don't know how they rate the beets, but if you had a beet rating that you could have on that as you enter the Ready Potato, it'd be like the ratings on buildings for insulation, But I like the idea. Is it something that the municipality, like Uni Hall, could be doing too?
I think it's a really interesting idea. I think there may be a potential mismatch between the scale of communities where something like this makes sense and the size of Bowen Island. The city of Surrey, for sure. I mean, there's density, there's lots of businesses, there's lots of documentation about who those businesses are and what they're engaged in. We're 2.5 months into getting business license data. We don't know who our businesses are at this point. So I think the foundation for something like this isn't there at the moment, and I don't know if it really would be there in the long run given the size of Bowen Island. And the costs involved, Carla, are really quite steep given the kinds of commitments that we make to other things. If the funding is confirmed for the the rural dividend fund and we get the 100K that we applied for, I could see something like this being looked at as part of a community economic development plan for Bowen that was oriented to sustainability and really being aware of the kinds of things here. But in the short run, I don't think you would get council support for it.
I agree. It's like 25,000 is just, it's a different scale.
Yeah.
And I agree with Maureen, it absolutely works for a bunch of those other cities that we've seen, but for Bowen it's too little. We're too little. And also in terms of our emissions, there are almost all transportation. And so, I'd love to have BC Ferries do it. But that's not within our control. And they're starting to look at things anyway. But that's who needs to do the work, and TransLink is already working on this with moving towards electric buses. So I agree with Maureen.
Would it be of any value to approach the BEEP organization and say, is there a possibility you could develop something for smaller communities?
That's an interesting
Like I
idea.
said, it's the
Yeah.
McConnell Foundation supporting it, so it's it's a nonprofit. Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of little communities
Yeah.
out there that want to do their part, and so if that organization or another one could concentrate on medium and small communities, that would make sense.
That's a neat idea.
Yeah. When I originally contacted them, I said, how many businesses would you need to sign on for this to actually be worth your while to come here? I didn't really realize that there was a lot of cost for us involved with it. And I didn't think there would be a lot of businesses that would sign on, which is why I initially asked that.
Yeah.
And she assures me that, that it is scalable and that they do a lot of work with very small businesses, like businesses that only have 1 or 2 employees and that kind of thing. But the other question that I asked her too is there grant funding available for getting the BEEP done? And she was going to get back to me on that. So, if we can't find grant money for it, I have trouble seeing how we could sign up.
Yeah, but I think
But
it's
it's
good
something
to
to-
explore that. That's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah.
As Will said, somebody, the Ruddy Potato would probably be pretty keen to be able to have some sort of spreadsheet that they could, work with, and that would that would be able to, you could translate something into CO2 reduction sort of thing. So you'd be able to have a spreadsheet that would work for you. Something like that could be, kind of distilled down from something big that would go to a large organization. Might be possible.
We do have the provincial stats, the community energy and emissions inventories that are produced every couple of years, and I don't think I've circulated that. I went back and did some longitudinal stuff looking at where Bowen stands in the different categories that are part of the reporting. So, for instance, the last round of stats, they included emissions from essentially from clear cutting, and they hadn't done that previously. So it might be interesting for us to look at those stats and just see what is available at the moment at the community level, because they do that for all of the municipalities in British Columbia. And we actually are on a good trajectory, but the emissions that are reported do not include the ferry. It's Bowen Island without the ferry in the picture.
Yeah. Maureen, emissions from clear cutting, that sounds like it could be useful data for our top 5 things to do.
Yeah.
If you
I'll
can
find that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Steph, can you make that an action? Maureen, find community energy and emissions stats and circulate.
Okay. Anything more, Carla?
No, that was it for me.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Transportation Advisory Committee.
Okay.
David.
Yeah, so we've got on page 12 to 15, we've got, and there's a couple of things I could highlight, and I could highlight something else that's happened.
Sorry.
So if you look on page, the second page, so this is page 13 of 16, although 13 is sort of, can't read very easily, but that bullet just above the bottom, coordinating a meeting with transportation partners in May, hold one meeting with alternative transportation, smaller providers on Bowen Island, and then second meeting with Translink. So we had that meeting on Monday night, and I'll tell you a little bit about that meeting. And yeah, okay, I'll do that right now. So we had, it was really interesting meeting. We had the Bowen Transportation Society, that was the one I was talking about a few minutes ago. We had Zoom, you know, the one that was renting the scooters. And we had Translink. And Translink, the stuff that I didn't know about was really quite interesting. So Bowen Transportation Society, I think you, oh, what should we do? That went to council, and they've been told to work with us on next steps. Does everybody know what that is? I guess I have to give a quick explanation. So what it is, it's what I was mentioning earlier. It's to try to take Peter's business, the express bus downtown, to make it something that can last forever. So some discussions with Peter about, you know, buying his business and then buying a couple of buses and hiring drivers and having that become a way for, and then tying in with Brian. Brian was there at the meeting. So the water taxi, and they can get home from downtown in 45 minutes with no stress, and and way cheaper than cars, and a tiny bit more expensive than Translink. And so, Translink and BC Ferries. So they were working on that, but one of the issues that arises is you've got a whole bunch of people, you know, Apodaca takes about 40 people, so 40 people arrive and there's no bus there. And so that means the transportation on the island is, you know, people are parking their cars in places, and our parking lots are squashed full. And so that's sort of, it's a great thing, but it's got its own problems as well. So Zoom was, I'll then talk about Zoom. Zoom is having trouble getting a place to put their scooters, and so they might not be able to rent their scooters this summer. It looks like it's not going to happen. But they were also talking about e-bikes, and having e-bikes for tourists, but then, which is a cool idea, and they've been testing out some and so on. They could possibly do that because they take up less, they wouldn't need as much space, and it could be easier to manage. But then the conversation, there was also, we're not supposed to mention names, but I'll just mention, I don't remember his first name, but people know Matthew Redekop, and his son was there. His son is really keen on e-bikes. The trouble is he's 13, I think it is, and you have to be 16. So he's working on a system so that by the time he's legal, you'll have all kinds of e-bike systems. Anyway, what we were then discussing in the room was how do we, it's cool to have e-bikes for tourists, that's great, you know, no emission and all that sort of stuff, but how do we help our people who need to get across the island, such as commuters who are coming off that ferry? And so we sort of came up with the idea of they could be renting their bikes to tourists during the day, and they finish their ride somewhere near the end of the day, and then people get off the water taxi, and they could have booked an e-bike, and they take it home, charge it at home, bring it back down the next morning, ready for the tourists to use. So, you know, sort of ideas of using smartphones and smart systems to be able to coordinate things so that it works for tourists, but it also works for folks on Bowen. And as an avid e-bike user, they're fabulous bikes for Bowen because they deal with Bowen's difficult hills that are really quite tough for most people. So now I'll talk about Translink. And so you've probably heard that Translink has been working on a little pilot where they would have, where you could book rides on our buses, and they would be able to set up a system where they'll be able to be on call a little bit. The trouble, they sort of started working that out and they realized this doesn't really work because the on-call, because you have to catch a ferry and you have to get exactly there at the right time, you know, you can only divert a tiny little bit before you're taking too much time and you're gonna miss a ferry. So they realized that that one wasn't working very well, so they've come up with another pilot, which is way better and quite fantastic, where, and this will be in July and August, and we were trying to encourage them to make it go into September as well, because the non-tour, everything happens in September, where they would bring 2 more buses to Bowen, and they would have an on-call bus system on Bowen for the summer. So in other words, you'd be reserving them through your smartphone and so on. There'd be an app, and they'd go and help us. They could ride on Brian's water taxi and teach everybody how to put that onto their phones. You could book them and maybe even pay for them. Probably not. No, you'd use your Compass card. Book them, and then an algorithm in the bus would figure out where it was going to go and how it was going to get people home. So anyway, this could be, and this is the first of its kind that Translink is trying in the region. So we are a pilot, and we're a useful pilot because we're an island, isolated and all that kind of stuff. But we'll have to see how it works. So that's really quite, it's so important that we get bus service that covers the whole island instead of just a couple of routes. And so that's a super option, and that's as much as I know about it. That's during the weekdays and the afternoon and evening runs, and on the weekends, slightly different. They'll be operating on weekends as well, so that during the tourist season, tourists can get around.
Yeah.
So that's as much as I know about it, because it was in a public meeting, so I'm going to have to talk to Emma more about it to get more details. This was all just in a meeting 2 days ago. The other thing, which I also only know a little bit about, but is possibly even more important, is that, so the way it works right now with Translink, they just operate all their buses, and someone like Peter is given an independent transit ITC, independent ITS, independent transit service, where he applied and I helped him apply. He had to explain a bunch of stuff. And so he's allowed to run within their system. There aren't many ITSs, most of them don't work very well, apparently. What they're looking at is something where it'll be kind of similar to that, where a business or a nonprofit could organize a run and Translink will provide the rolling stock, the vehicles for it. But the nonprofit or business would pay for it or partially pay for it. Now, this is for what's happening with the express bus going downtown. The hardest part of that is getting equipment that, Peter's is really good at figuring out how to buy buses, but they're old and they break down. And so one of the things that the Bowen Transportation Society has been putting together a team of people is to figure out how to buy buses that are, good enough, but not as expensive as a brand new bus. So anyway, that's as much as I know about that, and this is all new to me, and Emma knows more, so I need to sit down and talk to Emma. But that's really interesting. If it's as flexible as it sounds, it could be quite something for us on Bowen.
Are they talking at all about GIS on the buses?
Yes, they are.
Buses? They are.
Yes, they are.
Thank God, yes.
Yes, they said absolutely that would be part of it. That's
Good.
right. Yeah, and
Because
that was one of the things
that's
that was
probably
raised.
one of the most important
Yeah.
things they can do.
Yeah,
So you know what doing buses.
exactly. Yeah.
Peter, David, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm thinking Peter's buses.
Yeah.
The buses I'm riding, the transit buses I'm riding are getting, there's more and more of them are hybrids.
They're hybrids, I know.
And my brother, who's a mechanic that fixes buses in Ontario, is saying they're starting to become electric buses only, not trolley buses, but ones with big batteries. And I'm just wondering if the way to go to make this most sustainable is maybe find some grants to get electric or hybrid buses for.
That's a great idea, and that's something that Bowen Transportation Society is sort of remote about. That it's trying to make a business plan that works.
Yeah.
And unaware of a grant would help them that much. But interestingly, at the Metro Vancouver retreat thing that I was at on the weekend, I was sitting at a table with Jonathan Cote, who was chair of the Mayor's Committee, TransLink, and they're moving to electric buses. And Sue, and they're phasing them in. And I forget if he said 10 years or 20 years, which is really stupid that I can't remember because those are quite different, 100% different. But anyway, it's a bunch of years from now, but they're phasing them in and moving that way. So I was really pleased to hear that. So that was our meeting that we had, innovation meeting on Monday, and that's kind of my report for that. The other thing is, if you look on the last page, page 14 and 16, by unanimous consent, the committee agreed to the following actions, and the second to last. Oh no, you can read that whole last thing, a mobility fest. So what we're looking at is to have some sort of an event. So this is BIMTech, some sort of an event. It could be in collaboration, say, with BoFest, or it could be with the farmers markets, or it could be an entirely separate thing. We're going to work on this at the next BIMTech meeting. We've invited Kim Honor, because Kim is an absolute guru on new things electric and anything new and techy. Kim's ahead of the curve on that. And so it's going to be a brainstorming meeting where we're going to try to figure out, and it's not going to be just, well, at the last meeting we decided it's not going to be just electric stuff that's really way up there. It's going to be anything that helps mobility, so it helps people move around. So it could be gas scooters as well, even though they're not zero emission, they're pretty low compared to cars. So anyway, it's looking at all of those kinds of things, whether those are little scooters that you stand on, but whatever. Maybe bring in some model bikes for people to test on the field, or all kinds of ideas are open like that. But some sort of a new mobility festival, just to get people aware of all that. Even electric cars could be possible, but we'll see. We'll see where this brainstorming session goes.
Yeah. How about even things for people with mobility issues? There's the library now has a bush wheelchair that they
that's fantastic.
that you can hire out. It's not propelled, but it's something that's designed for going on trails, and I've seen it in use once in Crippen Park, but it's I think even just having that included, there's a lot of people that don't know about it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Send me an email.
Okay.
You know how easily I forget things.
That's
great.
I need those emails too.
I think that's it for my transportation report.
Okay. Well, I don't think you can go away, David. I think you're on next to Maureen.
And it's not latest and greatest in transportation, but for the first time yesterday, I saw 4 kids walking abreast down Trunk Road. I've never seen that before. They were walking on the
new path.
the part of the path that's being developed.
Yeah.
And they looked safe.
Yeah.
So it was, I was surprised by how strongly I was struck by this image of 4 kids walking down the road. I thought, wow, I've never seen that on Bowen. Without thinking, oh, for God's sake, get off the road.
I just worry about that road. So, especially when it starts to get dark, people trying to walk, coming down those last corners, it's really awful. Okay, composting. So composting is difficult. Composting used to be fairly simple when we didn't have food scraps. And I've done it in my backyard for a zillion years. And sometimes it can go wrong. If it goes wrong, it's bad. Because then it smells, which is not a nice thing. But worse than that, it creates methane, which means you're doing very bad things for the environment. If it creates methane, if it doesn't have enough oxygen. So I was involved in the whole shift to food scraps in Metro Vancouver. I'm trying to do that. I was involved in the communications and figuring out how to get people to do it. I did speeches on it. And we were all very, very proud of this work. And so Al Gore came in and he opened this Harvest Power, which was an old composting place called Richmond Soil and Fibre in Richmond. and they put in a whole lot of capital. It was a great, fantastic environmental achievement. It closed down a little while ago because of odor. They couldn't get rid of the odor, and it's gone. And now we send our compost all the way up to Pathwest, to Pemberton. Composting is, with food scraps, is really hard. If you get it wrong, the smell is awful, and of course it encourages other creatures to come and have a little bit to eat as well. So for us on Bowen, in my election brochure 15 years ago, I said, let's compost things on Bowen, it's ridiculous, we shouldn't be shipping it off, blah, blah, blah. We still haven't, but for good reason. So we've got the report that we had from Mark a month or so ago, which is great, but that's not composting, it's really dehydrating, and it uses energy, and then it creates energy, perhaps if you burn the stuff. So it's not ideal. I've also received a sort of a kind of a sketch of a proposal from a company called Evergreen that Sue Ellen and I have been talking to. At the Metro Vancouver retreat on the weekend, so I asked the head of solid waste at Metro Vancouver, Paul Henderson, for help, saying, we have to do this really carefully. We can't go and invest in something that then we have to then dismantle or cause trouble or anything like that. So he asked me to grab all the numbers I could, so I got that from Raj in terms of how much we're spending, what the volumes are, and so I'm going to meet with Paul on 17th, Friday, a week and a half or 2 weeks from now, something like that, to sort of look at what's feasible, what technologies are feasible, because the trouble is, when you're using food scraps, you want to enclose it to some degree, and you need to be making sure you're turning it and moving it, and there was a system, the study that Maureen circulated to me a while ago, there's a really good looking system that moves things along nicely, but it's going to make sure it works really well. I'm going to show that to him. But other ones that generate energy are even better in many ways, because if you take organic materials and you let it, let's call it rot, without oxygen, it creates methane, which is a greenhouse gas, but it's also natural gas, CH4, which is what they can do in what they're doing in Surrey, for example, where it's biofuel, and they fuel all their trucks with it. But on Bowen, we don't have natural gas. We don't have a natural gas system. We can't pipe it into the natural gas system. What do we do with this stuff if we generate energy? And methane is an explosive gas, so you don't want volunteers fiddling around with a system that produces an explosive gas. So, there's all kinds of tricky bits to this. So I'm going to sit down with Paul to talk about potential technologies and then potential pathways. Like, what would a feasibility study look like? Who could do that kind of thing? How long would it take? How much would it cost? All that sort of stuff. So that's what I'm going to do, or start doing, a couple of Fridays from now, and be able to then sort of get a sense of where we are from a business planning perspective. Now, this potential money is something I also will be able to have in my back pocket to say, well, we can pay for it if we need to do in terms of a good feasibility study.
Yeah. We were given a sense that the 20,000 would actually be a reasonable amount, given the scope of work that was in the last study.
Yeah.
So the timing's pretty good that the money's
I'll
coming
say.
forward, and
I'll
you're
say.
looking for somebody
Yeah.
to help.
No, I knew nothing about that. I was thinking, okay, how are we going to do this on the cheap? Okay, so that's where we are on composting, and I'll have more news in a short while, and I'll look through what Raj has given me, and I'll probably go talk to Louise as well to see, okay, Louise, just so I can get it. For instance, one of the interesting things, which I don't have in Raj's data, is the difference between garden clippings and food scraps. It'll probably become like 50-50 in the summer, but in the winter it's going to be 9-10 on the food side. So how do you handle that? Probably means you're going to be storing, leaves and things like that in your system, so you can feed it in the winter or something. I don't know. I'm just thinking that.
And how do you stop it from composting while being stored?
What's that?
How do you stop the leaves from being from composting while you're storing them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can chip wood and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's composting for now.
Thanks.
Henderson.
At the other extreme from sort of the technological solution was just that at a minimum we should be thinking about either encouraging or delivering some sort of sessions on home composting. interested.
That's why I was
It doesn't address,
interested.
yeah, it doesn't address the issues around, you know, methane and so on, which was part of the motivation for the NICMAC not being interested in this feasibility study
Yeah.
that we had proposed. But at least it's doing something. And probably 7 or 8 years ago, there was a composting event that was held in Davies Orchard, where there were all different models of home composting bins and processes that were profiled. So depending on how things go with
Yeah.
the discussion with Paul, we could potentially move forward with something more modest. And
Yeah.
I think it was pretty low organizational requirements to bring these folks in and have them show what they do.
We also, in my work with Metro Vancouver on this, we looked into units that were sized small enough for apartment complexes or even restaurants, and we convinced, I think it was one of my staff was working with this apartment complex, and they bought the thing and all that kind of stuff, and it wasn't great. It required too much effort. You've always got to be working at it to make the balance right and all that kind of stuff. So it's always tricky.
On another note, last meeting you weren't here, but we talked about the Grafton's and this idea of a composting system that's very simple to put together, economical, and the results amazing. I don't know if anybody spoke to you about that, but I would love to just even run it by you at some point and get
If you're not putting food waste into it,
yeah.
it's great.
Well,
You can do it.
there will be some green waste from the garden itself, but nothing cooked and nothing.
No, the green clippings, they're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just want, that you can do it, and it's been done. Swellen knows how to do it.
Great.
It'd be great, and you produce fabulous stuff.
Yeah, this is a round, it's
Yeah.
new technology that somebody brought in, looks really, really interesting.
Whistler has an amazing facility. I don't
Oh,
know
do
if
they?
anyone else has been there, but they do their all of their green waste, and they also have their biosolids incorporated as well. And so it's just this big tall building where there's bins of this stuff, and then they put the right mix in, and it goes through these tunnels. And so everything's closed completely. There's
Yeah.
no smell
Yeah.
associated. Well, there is when you're inside the building, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it doesn't. I mean, it's quite open and you can't smell it at all. And then it has a nice clean product that comes out, and it's totally monitored. All of the temperatures. You're assured that there's no.
And that's for the municipality of Whistler?
Yeah.
Which population, anyone know? It's less than Bowen. No, it's not.
It's
more than
but-
Bowen.
It's over 10K.
It's over 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
11,854.
So, but I don't know if it's scalable or
Yeah.
or what, but it's
Do you
something to
know
look at.
Any
anyways.
links or anything like that?
No, I've looked for it since
Oh,
and
okay.
can't seem to find it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Does it have
It's just
like an
what-
auger system to
Yeah, I
rotate?
think-
Yeah.
yeah,
Because that's
Like
what the
that-
green
that
mountain technology.
Green Mountain, yeah, looked pretty great.
Yeah.
yeah, I think they stop it and they monitor the temperatures, and as long
Yeah.
as it gets to this temperature for
Yeah.
4 days, and then they move it forward,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's always something in every kind of step.
Yeah.
So I mean, it looked expensive, but you never know. I think they've had it for, I'd say, at least 10 years now. And
Wow.
I think it works quite well. So
You
they
did
probably have a
something-
lot going in there, especially in tourist season though. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
A lot of restaurant stuff and so on,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's something we as a society have to learn to do well. It's really important. Like food waste going into landfills is really bad. So never put your food waste in the garbage, anyone. Speaking of television there.
To our many, many viewers.
Yeah, many viewers.
All three of them.
Well done, thanks, Will.
Yeah, well, thanks, David. You have been a busy beaver, haven't you? Thank you so much. I think that's,
So I've made the revised agenda, so all of the, I'll just send it to you right now, so all of these are going to be for Jeff, we don't know. We'll be in a revised package, I'll email it to you so you can have this information digitally. And then there are those information as well.
yeah. So
Okay.
that's it. And look, it's 9
9 o'clock,
o'clock.
perfect timing.
What a
chair.
This is,
Yeah,
so do we have a motion to adjourn?
yes.
Okay, it's done.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Will.
everyone.
Thanks, Emil.